Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. I am Andres Villalba, I am a sales engineer at Sencha, and today I will be guiding you on how to build custom components with Sencha Ext JS. What we will be covering is 5 different components, but first I will remind you how to create a basic application. This is going to be simple, this is going to be quick, since I have done it plenty of times in previous webinars, so I don't want to waste everybody's time, it's just a basic reminder. Afterwards, we're gonna learn about custom components, how to build them, where's the best place to store them, and what are the best practices. Take in mind when you're working with XJS, you're creating custom components all the time because you're extending from existing components. However, this time around, what we're going to be doing is just create a folder with our custom components and something that we can reuse on different projects or in the same project in different views. Afterwards, we're gonna get to the main part of our webinar. We're gonna learn how to build these 5 components over here. The first one is just going to be a basic component. It's kind of useless, but it's just something to get you acquainted with how it works. The second one is also simple. It's a toggle button. It exists in our modern toolkit. However, it doesn't exist in our classic toolkit. So what I will be doing is just creating a new component showing you how to use CSS, how to use XJS to create this button and save the value on a text field, actually on a hidden field. And afterwards, we're gonna move to something a little bit more complex, a vertical timeline. That's also going to be simple, but it's a little bit different than the previous two. Then we're gonna get to the hardest components on today's webinar, the Gantt chart and the Kanban board. Of course, we only have an hour, so I don't want to waste more time, but take in mind that these are fully functional, but there's a lot more to build on them. At the end, if we have a couple of minutes, I will answer a few questions for you. So let's begin. Okay, so let's talk about XJS. If you're new to the framework, this part is for you. Otherwise, please bear with me. I'll be quick. XJS is a JavaScript framework. We are one of the oldest ones, so this means we have a robust framework and it can be used to build any kind of applications. It has over 140 components, anything from grids, charts, calendars, buttons, layouts, windows, panels, a lot of different components. If you want to learn more, at the end I will have some useful links and you can take a look at them on our kitchen sink. It uses MVC and MVVM architectures. You can choose either one. You can have some views in MVC and some other views in MVVM. That's fine. It also contains 2 different toolkits, the modern and the classic toolkit. If you want to use the modern toolkit, that's better suited for mobile devices, but it will work fine on desktop devices. If you want to use the classic toolkit, the same is true. It's better for desktop devices, but it will work fine on mobile devices too. Or you can create an universal application that can switch between those 2 different toolkits. It uses data packages by using model and stores. We will be talking about stores today because a few of the custom components we will be building will use stores. It has one of the most powerful out-of-the-box JavaScript grids, and we will be using a grid to work on our very own Gantt chart. And then also something important that is that it has multiple layouts. You can show your information in different layouts. Then something important is that what we excel on is for enterprise level applications, is that it's cross-browser and you don't have to worry about this, it just works. Okay, so why build custom components? We can put everything inside our view if we wanted to, but as you know, that's not feasible. That's hard to maintain. If we want to reuse something, it's not going to be easy. So if we want to build our own components, we can reuse them in different views or even in different projects. We can encapsulate our logic and our UI in a single class. Something else, we're gonna have consistency in UI and UX. Since we have it encapsulated, we can put our style there and it's gonna keep that same style anywhere we put it. Then we can encapsulate also the complexity of our component. That way we can keep on reusing it without having to worry about its complexity. We're gonna see that inside our Gantt chart. Then also something important, is that it's going to be fully integrated into our ecosystem. They are gonna work just as any other component. That's going to make it easy. If you have new developers and they have just gotten used to XJS components, using one of the original components in XJS or using your own custom components is going to be pretty similar. This way, you are going to be able to optimize your performance because you will get rid of any unnecessary logic. And let's see a little bit more before we start with our examples. I really like creating custom components. It's one of my favorite things to do. I can create a component and give it to my teammates so that they can use them on different applications. So how to do that? Well, any custom components that you want to use and reuse on another application or reuse in another view, the best idea is to put it inside a special UX folder. So we're going to put it there and we can create subfolders to better organize them, or we can just throw them all in. It depends on you. And then we have to name this component, the name of our application, .ux, the folders that we have, the component name. That's basically it for folder structure. And our component, we have to define it by using x.define. There we're gonna use a string to give it its name. In this case, I'm saying my application is called my company, then .ux, because that's the folder where the UX components are saved in, the name of the component. But if I had several different folders, well, maybe I would have here ux.my folder my fancy button. Then we have to extend from an existing class. Which class? Whatever we want. In this case, I am showing you how to create a button. So I'm extending from a button, something that is similar in functionality to what I am creating. If I don't have anything similar, then I would use just x.component, and that's fine. Okay, but there's usually an existing component that would be the basis for our new one. For example, for our Gantt chart, we will be using grid column, okay? But we will take a look at this in a few minutes. Also, if you receive parameters, make sure you create a config property there with the default values. I will also show you that with an example, but it's something to take in mind. And make sure all your components are flexible to maximize compatibility. Today, that might not happen. I don't have the time to maximize compatibility, but I will try to do my best. And just like I was saying, this is my folder structure. So I have my app folder, then I created the UX folder, and inside of it, I have my button, and there I have the JavaScript, or in this case, the XJS class, and I have a CSS for the styling, and then I have another folder for the Gantt, and things like that, okay? We could throw everything inside UX, but that would be hard to maintain, and if I want to take this to a different project, it would be hard to find the files that I need to take with me. Also, if you're using custom CSS in the way I'm showing here, make sure that you either run AppWatch or you rebuild and refresh your application. Okay, that's the only way to get that CSS and compile it. Make sure you document everything, at least include some documentation on how to use your component. And of course, provide usage examples. We are about to create our first component, but we don't have an application. So let me just give you a quick reminder on how to build your first application. If you have a commercial license, you need to download Sencha command and the XJS SDK. If you have a trial license, by default, you will download Sencha command and you need to run the basic template from trial command over here on any command window. Otherwise, you can run any other command that I have here. For example, the basic template is the one that I'm going to be using today. The trial one looks quite similar and it's this command at the bottom. So basically all you do is type sencha-sdk, the URL to your SDK, then generate app, the toolkit you're going to be using. And today we are going to be using the classic toolkit, and then your application name. This application name can be anything that you want, just no spaces, no special characters. Usually I just say app or admin app or classic app or things like that. And at the end, the folder where your application will be created. In this case, I'm assuming I'm already inside that folder. For the trial, it's basically the same thing. Just specify the toolkit here and the application name over here. Okay, finally, we have reached our first example, the simple pointless component. What we will be doing is building a simple component that extends from a button. Since this is our first example, it will be somewhat pointless, hence the name. And with every click, we will change the text of the button. What we will learn here is how to create the component and how to receive parameters. That's basically it. Okay, that's all we will be doing on this first one. Before we started the webinar, I went ahead and I created the project. Basically, I used one of those command lines that I talked about before, and it created this folder structure for me. Make sure that you run Sencha app refresh and Sencha app build development so that your application works. I also run Sencha app watch to see what I have. What that command line created for me was an app folder, which basically has a model, a store, and a view folder inside of it. I went ahead and I created the UX folder where I'm going to be putting all those components that we talked about at the beginning of the webinar. Then I went into view, which we have a main folder in there already, and I created a panel folder, and that's where I placed my views. These are not the components, these are the sections that are going to display each and every of the components we are going to be talking about. So inside the main folder, there's a main.js file, and this is the place where I link those views with my main view. This is the file that contains the navigation. As you can see here, I'm linking to app, view, panel, first component view, and same deal for the other ones. This is the name of the app, not the name of the folder, okay? Then I went further down. I looked for the default body padding, which had a value of 20, I believe, and I changed it to 0 so that my different sections do not have a margin in them. I also changed the layout to fit to make sure that all the views occupy the whole screen instead of just a part of it. And then at the bottom where we have the items property, I changed what I had there, and basically I created a tab for each one of the different views that I have. So I have first component, then the toggle button, then I have the Kanban board, which I actually am just gonna throw at the end. Then I have the timeline, the Gantt, and finally, like I said, the Kanban board. Okay, and as you can see, basically how it works, since the main view is a tab panel, this is the title that is going to be displayed on the tab. This is the icon that will be with it inside of the items array. We have the actual component. So this is linking to the X type that I have over here. Okay, so we need to include it in both places. We need to include it as the X type over here, and we need to include it in the requires array over here. So it's quite simple, but that's what we have to do before we start. You can see that I already created this view, which extends from a basic panel, and I gave it an X type first component and then a simple title. Okay, so let's build it. This panel that I have here, I'm gonna use it to put a form in the center, kind of like a window. I'm just gonna put a form panel in the middle of the screen. So for that, I'm going to add an item. It's going to have an X type of form, okay? Gonna give it a width and a height. Let's just say for now 400 by 400 pixels. Gonna give it a title. Let's just say example. And let's also give it a border so that it kind of looks like a window. This doesn't have a layout, so we don't know what's going to do with it. So let's say layout center. That way the panel occupies the whole screen and the form is right on the center of it. Say I want to give it a margin, so I'm just going to say body padding 16 pixels. And I made a mistake. And as you can see, Sencha Watch is working down there. Let's go and test our application. And you'll see that there we have that window. We want to change the background color. That's easy. We can just change it over here. I'm going to change the background color for the panel. So I'm just going to say style. And there I'm just going to type background color. I'm just going to say that it's a basic light gray. Actually, it has to be body style. And as you can see now, it kind of looks like a window in there. So I'm just going to put that button that I was talking about right in the middle. Let's see how that would work. If I wanted to create it not as a custom component, probably I have to put it there under item. I would have to say X type button, give it some text. Let's say 20, and then I would have to give it an event and see that it deducts one value from each click. But I don't want to do it that way. I want to create my custom component. So let's go to UX, open useless, and there I'm gonna put my pointless button.js. Okay. Since this is the first field I'm going to be building, I'm gonna do everything for you here. The other examples, I'm going to copy and paste a few things to be faster. So here I'm just gonna say app UX useless dot pointless button. Okay, I have to extend from an existing component. This is what I was telling you before. If I don't know what to extend from, I can just extend from a component. Okay, but in this case, I do know what I want to extend from. So I'm just gonna extend from a button. If you don't know the name of the class you want to extend from, you can check our Sencha docs for that. Then I have to give it a next type. Just gonna call it pointless dash button. Okay, and then, like I said, any parameters that you want to receive and you want to have a default value, I should put them inside a config property. Just gonna say value, and by default, I'm gonna put 100 there. The default text, I'm just gonna leave it empty. Every component that you have should have a constructor, which in this case is called init component. This is for the classic toolkit. If you're using the modern toolkit, instead you will be using initialize. But the idea is the same. If you use init component, you need to call the parent method. And to do that, you say this to refer to the same object, call parent. So this is gonna get called when the component is initialized. Okay, so over here, what I'm gonna do is grab that value and pass it to the text. So this set text, and I'm gonna pass this dot value. This is quite simple. It doesn't do anything yet. All it's doing is grabbing this value and putting it into the text of the button. So now, instead of using button, I'm gonna use my pointless button there. Okay, I'm gonna take the text out and I'm going to require that file. So requires, I'm gonna copy the class name. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. Let's test it out. Let's see if it works. And that's what I have. It's a button with a value of 100. But what we want is every time we click that button, we want it to deduct one. So for that, most XJS components have listeners. Which ones do we have available? Well, there are quite a lot. So I have it over here. You go into Sencha docs and look for the button. You'll see that here we have events and we have quite a few here. You can look at other methods, properties, configs, and things like that. So that's basically it. And inside listeners, what I'm going to do is add the event for click. And here what I'm going to be doing is deduct from this dot value and send it back to the text. Why here? Well, because I want to deduct the actual number value, not the text. Let's just say this dot value, subtract, and then this dot set text. And over there, what I'm going to do is just send the value. There are plenty more ways to do it. I just wanted to do it this way. Now let's go and check it out and see if it works. And as you can see, now it is deducting. Okay. Now let's say that I wanted to use that same button again. Well, I'm just gonna put it side by side, just like that. And I want the first pointless button to start from, say 10, the second one to start from 20, and the third one to start from 50. And let's go check our window. And now I have those three buttons there. Of course, we didn't check what happens when you reach zero, so it just will just go to minus values. Okay, but what I wanted you to see there is that you can use your components as many times as you want and how to create a simple pointless button. That's all I have right now. Let's move on to the next component and do something a little bit more complex instead of this. Let's move on to our second example, the missing toggle button. And like I said before, we're going to be creating a toggle button that exists on the modern toolkit, but it doesn't exist on the classic toolkit. This is going to be also quite simple, but in this case, it's going to have a button and a text field. If we activate the button, it's going to change the value to true. If we deactivate it, it's going to change the value to false. So we can use this button also as a Boolean field. For the toggle button, I'm going to do something similar. So let's go to the first component. Let's take that layout. Let's take that body style. Let's put it here too. Let's also take, I don't know, the whole items array. But now, instead of having that pointless button, we're gonna change that for our new toggle button that we're going to be creating in a few minutes. So let's go to our field folder inside UX. And here, I'm just gonna create that toggle button.js. And since this is going to have a style in it, I am also going to create a toggle button.scss. Okay, I'm gonna have both classes in there. Also, to make it work, let's add that requires array. And here, of course, I'm going to include the name of the class for the toggle button, which is just going to be app.ux.field toggle button. Let me get also the start of the useless button. I'm gonna put that inside my toggle button so that I have somewhere to start. So that's going to be toggle button there. And this one is going to be called toggle dash button. Okay, the config is going to be different. Let's say that it's going to be true by default. Let's take that out. Let's take that out for now. And this too. So basically, I have something to start with. I don't have to start from scratch. Okay, and instead of pointless button, it's going to be toggle button. Of course, it must be field, like I said, and field over here. So like I said before, this component over here is going to actually contain two things, the button and a text field. So I'm gonna add those two inside of it. So that's going to change a few things, not only the contents, but it's no longer going to be a button. It's not going to extend from button anymore. Why? Well, because here I'm gonna have an X type button, and over here I'm gonna have an X type text field, which later I will change to a hidden field. This cannot be a button, so I'm gonna change it to an X form field container. Once again, you can check that in our documentation or even in the kitchen sink. Just to check it out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a simple value, which I will take out later. I'm just gonna say click me, and I'm going to have a text field, okay? And over there, I'm just gonna give it a name. Let's call it item for now, and let's give it a value of 0. What we're going to be doing is whenever this one is clicked, we're gonna change the value of that one. Right now, I'm just gonna click on it and change 0 and 1 depending if it's true or false. Over here, I have this called parent. It's a good idea here in Ext.js to use a property called me just to make it easier to work with the scope. Okay, first thing is when you're creating a field, you usually give it a name because you want to send that field value to the backend or do something. So usually you would say something like name, let's say active. Okay, it's gonna say field label. I'm just gonna say active. Okay, and the value, let's just say that I want to pass through to it. Okay, and this is being done in the view. This is what I want to send my toggle button. So once I get here, the first thing that I have to do before I actually call parent, because when I call the parent, it's gonna grab this array and actually build the buttons. I want to change a few things. I'm gonna say that the name of that text field is going to be different. So I'm gonna say items, which is an array. I'm gonna grab the second element of the array, dot name. I'm going to give it the actual name that my toggle button has. What I do is I give it a default name, just gonna call it toggle example, okay? So what I'm doing is I'm grabbing this name or whatever it was sent over here, and I'm gonna pass it to the text field because that's the one I want to send to the backend. Also, I'm gonna take the name out. I can give it any value that I want. I can just give it a null value so that it doesn't get sent to the backend. And I'm gonna give the value that I receive also to that field over here. Okay? I hope I am explaining myself, but it should now send the either the true value or the false value that we receive. Notice that I left the name outside the config value there. That's fine. We can put it either way. I'll move it inside just to use the best practices. Okay, if we go on and check that out, what we have is this. We have a button that does nothing and the value in a text field. Okay, if I change this to false and try it again, you will be able to see that now it starts with false. Okay, another thing that you might have seen is the button is on top and the field is on the bottom. So for that, I can change the layout, although it doesn't matter because I'm going to hide that text field. But for now, so that it makes a little bit more sense, I'm going to change the layout to an H box, and that will probably make more sense to you. So basically, it will look like this. Okay? What I want is whenever the button is clicked, I want to change the text field value. Okay, so remember that we have listeners, we can put a listener there, or for buttons, we also have a handler, which basically is the same that the click listener. It receives the actual button with some other parameters, but that's the one I need right now. Okay, and what I'm going to do here is from the button, I'm gonna obtain the container and I'm going to change the value. So if it's true, it's gonna become false. If it's false, it's gonna become true. So the way I do it, this is the button. I want to go up a level. So I'm here, I'm going up over here, and I'm going to use the X type for that. I can navigate through items in different ways. I could have given it a reference, an item ID, or just a basic ID, but the way I'm doing it, it's to keep it simple and to make it compatible with anything. To this one, I'm gonna send it into a variable. So let's say component like that, okay? And I'm saving it there. Now I'm gonna say component dot value, not component dot value. So since the value is true, it's gonna be changed to false, and the opposite is true. After that, I'm gonna change the value to the text field. I can leave it as true and false. but I don't want that. I want a 0 or a 1, and the backend will receive the 0 or 1 and do whatever it needs with that. So button up took me up one level. Button next is going to take me to the next element, this one. I can also specify the X type if I have several elements. And then I'm going to set the value. And here I'm gonna use an inline if. I can do it any other way, but what I'm going to say is component value, if that's true, okay? I'm just gonna say 1. If that's false, I'm gonna say 0. We go and check this out. Now, whenever I click it, it's gonna swap between 1 and 0, okay? But let's do something a little bit more interesting. Gonna also allow it to receive an array of values. So let's say that I want to receive yes or no, okay? So instead of sending that 1 or 0, what I can do is say component dot values, and if it's true, I'm gonna send the first value, and if it's false, I'm going to send the second value. Okay, of course, if I'm doing that, should be doing the same thing for this specific value over here, right? So I have to check it out like this, and it should be me.value, me values values like that. But instead of having yes or no, I'm just gonna say 1 or 0 because that makes sense to me as a Boolean value. Let's go ahead and let's create some CSS and some HTML. What I usually do here is that I override whatever I have as a style. So on the button, I'm gonna give it a CLS, so a CSS class. That's how we do it here in Next.js. And I'm gonna give it any name. I'm just gonna call it toggle dash button, okay? Then what I'm also going to do next is use this CLS to create the class and make it look a little bit different. And also I'm going to insert some text in it. So I'm going to create a render button method. I can name it whatever I want. That's what I wanted to name it, okay? So this method, which is in the whole component, just gonna take the whole component like that, and then I'm gonna get the button and I'm going to do it like this. Instead of up, I'm just gonna call down. This is going to look through its children, and I can use the X type to get that specific one. Then I'm going to create the contents. I have already created this before when I was preparing the webinar. So to do it a little bit faster, I'm just going to copy and paste from what I have already. So let's copy and paste over here. What I'm putting there is basically HTML inside the button. Of course, I'm missing a line at the end. Change the text of the button. Okay, and let's put that HTML here. And it's basically a div with this class over here that has two different styles. One for the head when it's inactive and another one when it's active. And I have an array of colors. That way I can change the color of the component depending on if it's active or not. And for that, I'm also going to add an array of colors. So that's what I called it, yeah. So this is an X value, just like we use it on CSS or HTML. And I'm gonna say when it's true, it's going to be some shade of green. And when it's false, it's going to be a shade of red. Okay, let's change this to 1 and 0. And I have to render the button. So for that, after I call parent, I'm gonna say me render button. And also when the value gets changed, I'm going to render the button to render button component. Okay, I hope that makes sense. But I haven't created the CSS. Once again, to save some time, let me copy and paste from the document I created before. So I created the toggle button class. Basically, I'm getting rid of everything, the border, the background, and I'm changing the box sizing. Also, I'm changing the X button inner to 100% to make sure that it matches the whole size of the button. Now, if we look at what we have here, we have a toggle container, which contains both the signs of the button, the active and the inactive one. That's what I'm going to copy here and paste. And basically, this is a pill-shaped box, and that one will contain both options, like I said. Then I'm going to create the actual head of the toggle button, meaning the round selector. It has a transition so that it animates. It has a default color. That's the one that it's going to change with what we did before. Whenever we change the active flag, we're going to change the design. So we have an active toggle, inactive toggle, and what we're doing is changing the opacity of it. And we're also moving the toggle head to the right or to the left, depending if it's active or not. And before we test that out, let me just change something really simple. Let's add a basic width to that button If we don't do this, it's going to be really thin and we won't be able to see it. So now that we have done so, let's check it out. It should look like a pill. And as you can see, it's here. Doesn't change. But now we have this button. We're missing one thing and that's it, which is just animating that. And we have everything on our CSS to make it work. We only need to use toggle active when the button is active or nothing when it's not. For that, I can do it just in any of the methods that I have, but for that right now, I'm just gonna create an update button method, okay? And here, what I'm going to do is basically just change the style. So let me just copy and paste. So we're getting the whole component, we're getting the button, we're getting a new CLS. If the value is true, we're gonna set the user CLS as active, otherwise we're going to remove it, okay? And when are we going to call this method? Well, first, we're going to call it when the component is clicked, okay? I missed that over there. So over here, let's say I'm just gonna call the update button, okay? Because that's going to change the CSS. That's it. We don't need to render the button again. And then in the init component, yes, we're gonna render it first so that it creates this part over here. But second, what we're going to do is just update the button so that we use whatever value we received. Okay, so let's try it once again. And as you can see, now it is animated with the colors that I selected. I said that I was going to use a green value. I used a blue one by mistake. Let's change that to green. And as you can see now, here it is. What are we missing? We need to hide that over there. Let's change the text field to hidden field. And we're done. Now we have a working toggle button. I know I went through a few things just by copying and pasting, but we don't have the time to look at them. Okay, let's move on. That was also quick and easy. We're going to be building our third example, which is the vertical timeline. This is going to be a little bit different. This one doesn't have any interactivity. It's just a basic component that shows dates and text. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at it and let's build it. For this third example, what I need is some backend. I'm not gonna have anything running over here in the backend. Basically, I'm just gonna create a JSON file. So I'm just gonna create a data folder, and inside of it, I'm gonna get some data that I have already created for this timeline. So let me just copy and paste. And here it is. Basically, it's just a basic JSON. It has some data. That data are 7 rows containing a year, a title, and a description. Ext JS requires a success flag to know if the data was found, and also a count variable to know how many rows were read. I'm going to be using that for this example. I also want to remind you that the next month we're going to have JavaScript days, and over there I'm going to be building something very interesting with AI, and there I am going to use Node.js as the backend, but for now this is something simple, just front end. And I already went ahead to, and over here inside the UX, inside timeline, I created a basic class, okay? Nothing in it, something really basic, and some CSS, okay? Same thing, I'm gonna go into the view panel, and inside the timeline view, what I want to do is call that UX component, okay? So basically, I need the requires array again, and as you know, I need to get that class over here. And to load it exactly where I want it, I need to get the X type and put it over here. Once again, this is a panel, this is occupying the whole space of the screen, but I want the timeline to also, in this case, occupy the same space. So I'm just gonna say fit. So now that I'm over there, let's actually go ahead and create the timeline. This one, I'm going to do pretty much everything inside the init component. Well, there's a simple reason, and that's because this is something static. So something else that I'm going to be doing is that I'm gonna pass the name of the store. So just as any other example, I'm gonna give it the name, and let's say that this is called timeline store. Okay, so inside of stores, I'm gonna create a new file. I'm gonna call timeline store.js. And same idea, just to be fast, just gonna copy and paste from something that I had created before. Okay, if you remember, this is going to be loading the data from over here, data timeline. I'm actually going to add another dash there. Okay, this is the properties that I have over there. I want to order by year. I have these fields over here. It's going to auto load. It doesn't have a callback method, and this must match the name of my class. And the alias is the one that I'm going to be using here. Okay, That's going to be received by my timeline component. And that's where I'm going to be creating everything. So let's go on and let's create this class. Like I was saying, we have the view, we have the store, and we have the actual component. So I'm sending the store this way. This store has a load listener, which is going to be calling a callback method if it exists. So first thing that I have to do is actually make sure that I'm requiring that store. Okay, so let's just do that. And it should go something like this. Here I'm just going to copy the name of the store class, put it there. And here I'm using store type. So on the timeline, I'm gonna add a config property where I'm going to put all the parameters that I receive. So for now, it's a store by default null. I'm also going to create the init component method. And remember, there I have to call the parent method. So me, call parent, okay? Now, since I'm receiving the store type this way, I have to know what to do with it. I could actually create the store with something like this, Ext create and put the store in there, or I can use a factory. But before I do so, let me just make sure that the store is different than null. So I actually received the store. If I did, I'm gonna override it and I'm going to be using a different method. I'm gonna use a factory method, which basically what it's doing, it's going to receive the store object and it's going to create the actual store, okay? But something important here, I'm expecting to receive this callback method. I'm gonna say me.store.callback. I'm gonna put a method here, okay? This one is going to receive the records, just like we saw over here, and I'm gonna call another method. Let's say me.create timeline, and I'm gonna send the records once again, and this is going to be create timeline, and over here I'm just gonna have the actual records. And here is where all my logic is going to be to create the view for this component. Just to see if it's working, I'm gonna add a console.log over here. Gonna say creating timeline. Okay, and let's see if this is working. As you can see, I didn't get anything because I'm not rendering anything just yet. But if this is fine, I should have something down here. It says creating timeline, okay? So let's go back. That's fine, that's what I was expecting. So over here, I must have the logic to create my timeline. Basically, I'm receiving all the records. So what I'm going to do first, I'm gonna make sure that I have an items array. I can put it up here, items. I'm just gonna say it's an empty array. This will make it easier since I know the panel now has items. I'm also going to add a layout because with this layout, I can put every single entry for my timeline one above the other. And so that layout is called vbox. And I'm also going to make sure that all its rows occupy the 100% of the available width. So far, so good. Okay, let's loop through those records. What I'm doing here basically is just looping through those. So I'm gonna say records for each, and I can do it several different ways. I'm gonna use an arrow function, and here I'm just gonna say that I'm going to receive the actual record, the item, and the index. Okay, and with each row, I'm going to add to this component. So let's say here, let me equal this. Once again, that's for scope. What I'm going to add here, well, I'm going to add a container. It could be whatever I wanted, just like before, but I want a container because I'm gonna add different items in it. So I'm gonna have different columns. I'm gonna have one with the date and another one with the title and description. Okay, so I'm gonna say layout. This time it's gonna have something on the left, something on the right. It's an H box. And then I'm gonna put some items in it. So for now, the first item will have a small width, let's say 120 pixels, some HTML there. For now, I'm just gonna say hello. And for the second one, I'm gonna give it a flex value of 1, and the content is gonna be a description for now. Okay, let's save. Let me just say defaults. What defaults do is whatever I have in this will be part of each item. So let's say X type container. Before we test, let me fix this little mistake over there and let's test it out. And now as you can see, I have hello, description, hello, description. This is going to be the date, and this is going to be the actual title and description. As you can see, it's on the left and on the right. Okay, that's because we are using an HBox. Let's change a few more things. So instead of hello, that's going to be the record title. So I'm just gonna say record get, and what I'm going to get is the year. Sorry, I said title, it's year. And on the description, all I'm going to do is I'm gonna get the title here. I'm going to add a line break, and then I'm gonna paste the description. And let's test that again. As you can see, this is what I have right now. It's kind of ugly because I haven't added any CSS just yet. So I'm gonna add some HTML before I add the actual CSS on my timeline CSS file. So what am I going to do? I'm gonna add a class, a CSS class over here. So I'm just gonna say CLS, and I'm gonna call this timeline entry. Okay, just to call it something simple. What else? Well, each row, it's also going to have HTML instead of this. I want to put something a little bit more interesting, so I'm not just going to leave the year there. I'm gonna add more HTML. So I have it over here, and this is what I have right now. So I have a block, a timeline block. It has a dot, it has a triangle, and it has the year. Notice that I am using a backwards quotation, and here I'm putting the year. This makes it easier so that I don't have to concat everything. And I'm going to do something similar on the bottom. Over here, I also have a block. In this case, it is called timeline info, and I have a title and I have a description. I'm going to test this now, and let's see how it looks. And as you can see, it's pretty similar to what we had, but now we are using our HTML. Okay, so the next step is to actually work on our CSS. Since this is a long webinar, right now I'm just gonna grab this from my notes and I'm gonna explain a little bit of it here. So first thing is I created a container. I have a before option over here, and that allows me to create a vertical line for my timeline. And I have a timeline entry to encapsulate the whole row. So that one's over here. I also have a timeline block and a timeline info. And there I have the dot, the triangle, the year, the title, and the description. So let me bring those from my notes over here. And as you can see, I have the timeline block, which is basically just a layer, just the same that timeline entry. The block is the left part. There I have a dot, I have a triangle. I use some CSS to create a circle. I use some CSS to create a triangle. And I am also using it to locate the year and put it on screen. Then I have the timeline info, which is also a layer, and there I am locating all the text, the title and the description. So let me save. I have already done something that it will make it easy, but in case App Watch is not actually capturing any changes you're doing to your CSS, just stop it. Control C would do the trick and run it again. That way, it will capture any changes that you perform to your CSS. Since this is a new file, sometimes it won't capture by itself. You need to force it by closing it and open it again, just like I mentioned. So I'm just waiting for it to finish. And once it's done, I'm gonna go ahead and test again. And as you can see, now this is what I have. I have the vertical timeline. I have this icon over here, and I have the text. So there are a few things that I want to do. I want to mark the latest one in a different color, and I want some rollover when I locate my mouse over it. And that's just going to be CSS, so that's kind of simple. So I have this option over here. I'm gonna put it at the end, and whenever my class adds the latest property over here, it's going to change the color to this blue shade that I have here. How do I actually do it? Over here where I have my CLS, I'm gonna apply a simple change there, which basically it's going to add something extra. So now let's add an inline if here. So I'm just gonna do it this way. If the index is 0, meaning it's the first item, I'm just gonna add the property latest. Otherwise, I'm just gonna leave it empty. And also let's add the rollover. So I have it in my notes over here. Let me just find it. Give me a sec. Over here, and let's paste it. And the rollover is gonna just change it to a different shade of green. And let's go and test this out. Of course, there is plenty more we can do, but right now this is how it looks. We could add a lot more, maybe some URL so that we can link to a different document, an image, things like that. Make sure that it's correctly aligned, things like that. Right now, this is just a basic timeline, okay? The cool thing about the way it works is right now I'm using the whole screen, but let's say I don't want a layout fit. I want it to be in the center, and I want my timeline to be, I don't know, 500 pixels by 600. And if we test that again, it's going to work, but it's going to be a small square right in the middle, okay? So this is just like any other component. I can place it wherever I want, okay? And it's going to work fine. So maybe I can place a grid on the right, or maybe an image, I don't know, a properties panel, whatever. Okay, that's enough with the easy examples. Let's move on to our fourth example, which is the Gantt chart column. Like I said at the beginning, what we are going to be doing is extending from a grid column. That way, we can use this special column in any grid. Let's see how this works. I'm not going to be creating every single case scenario for our Gantt chart. That's for you to update, but I think this works quite well. So let's take a look at it. This is, I believe, the hardest component that we are going to be looking at today. So I'm not going to start from scratch. I already have some files here. So basically, I have a Gantt view. That's the file we had from the beginning, but I added a few things. So it is not just a panel, it is a grid panel, has its title. It's already loading a store. Remember, since this is a grid, it's going to actually get the store data by itself. And I have two columns. One is the task title, and the other one is the chart data. Right now, this one is empty, and this is the title. I also have a store, which is called Gantt data. I hard coded the data here. I could have connected to the backend like we did before with the timeline store, okay, something like this. But right now I just wanted to do it fast, so that's why I have it here. And I have a Gantt model that describes what it's coming from the data store. I have several different columns. I have the ID, I have the name, I have start date, an end date, and a type, okay? This type, I will be using it to give it a different color to each row in case it has a different type. For now, I'm just going to display dates. I'm not gonna do it in weeks or months. That's something that you can add later if you want to, but right now we don't have the time. So let's just do it with the actual dates. Oh, I forgot. Also, the first column is locked, so it stays on the left and it is not affected by whatever data comes from the right, okay? And this is just a basic grid. I could add more columns if I wanted to. For example, if I wanted to, let's just say for now that here I just want, say, a width of 100 pixels. And let's say this is the type. I'm gonna put the type here. And as you can see, that's going to work too. Okay, basically I have it there. I'm gonna keep it that way. I'm gonna have the Gantt chart show up over here. Let's continue. So instead of just using the basic column over here, I'm gonna be using the column I'm going to create on the Gantt UX over here, a column.js class. And inside my Gantt view, I'm gonna require that. So that's going to be app UX Gantt column. And over here, instead of just having it like it is, I'm gonna add an X type. So let's separate this like that so that it makes a little bit more sense. And over here, I'm just gonna say X type Gantt column. Of course, I haven't created the Gantt column at all. I only have the actual file over here. So once again, just to be fast, I'm just going to copy and paste the beginning. So I have app UX Gantt. Let's call this column. And this is going to extend from a grid column. And that's the X type. And I'm going to have some CSS that I will be creating later today. So let's just say column.css. So I have the basic data there. What exactly I'm going to do? Well, I'm going to init my component. Remember, if this was of the modern toolkit, that would be initialize. So let me put a scope variable there and let me say call parent. And here I'm going to be doing a few things. Just gonna say parent grid over here. I'm gonna say null and I'm gonna get it here. Parent grid, parent grid equals me up and I'm gonna get the grid. Okay, now there are several parameters that we should be sending to our Gantt column. It depends exactly on what we want to define, but I created, well, I want to create something simple. So I'm gonna send everything inside of a property called Gantt. And here I'm just going to specify a start date and an end date. So just to make it easy, I'm just gonna do it this way. Let's say from the 1st of July towards the end of the month. So an end date and a start date, okay? I'm using a year, month, date format just to make it a little bit more universal, but I could change this if I wanted to. Then, as you saw here on our Gantt data, we have start field and an end field. We can assume that it's always these names over here, but for now I'm not gonna assume it, so I'm just gonna say start field and whatever I called it here. So start. So let's call it start. And also an end field. And let's call it end. And I am also going to say type field and same deal. That's the name of the field that I have there. Something else. I want a tooltip. I want when somebody puts the mouse over it, something to appear. So I'm gonna use some data binding here. Gonna get the name, then I'm gonna get the type, okay? And I'm also going to use a variable that I'm gonna create inside of it that it's going to be days. So that's why I'm using an underscore there. That's something that I want to use. Let's try something else. I'm gonna create an array of types. Remember that we have def, break, or QA? Well, I wanted to have a different color. I'm just showing this as complex as I can in what little time we have. So it's gonna say name def, and the color that it's going to be applied there is just green color, okay? And for the other two, I'm just gonna do it quite simple and quite fast. So let me just put it like this. Okay. For QA, I have a yellow color, and for break, I have a cyan color. And that's what I'm going to be defining. So I created this property that gets all these values over here. Okay, so let's add a few more options here. I'm going to add my config Gantt parameter. Remember, this one is the one that I'm going to be receiving from the front end, okay? That one is required. So if I don't have it, I should say something like you're missing your Gantt parameter. So me.gantt is equals null. I won't be able to continue. And then maybe I should say something like it's missing, right? So I'm just going to put here missing parameters. Could be whatever we want, but for now, I'm just doing that, okay? Now here, I'm also going to put some defaults, okay? Well, actually, I'm just gonna get this from over there. And I know this is not the best thing to do, but I should put here a start date and end date. This is fine over here, okay? Let me put that there. And maybe I'm not gonna have any styles. That's gonna be an empty array. And it's fine, let's leave it just like that. Okay, and these are going to be my Gantt defaults. Of course, this is better if it was maybe the first of this month. And that's actually quite easy to do in Ext JS. So basically all I have to do is just say something like that. And I'm just gonna say a new date over here, and then something similar for the end of the month. And that's actually just going to get the first day and the last date. Okay, now that we are up to that point, let's actually mix these Gantt parameters with the Gantt defaults. So if we actually do have parameters there, what I'm going to be doing is an Ext apply to mix them both. And for that, I'm just gonna say get first the defaults and then the actual new data. And remember, since this is a private property, maybe I should locate it over here instead. That makes a little bit more sense, and now it's private. Okay, and that's getting them mixed, and I'm gonna save that as just me.gantt. Also, this date, I'm just gonna give it a format. So I'm gonna use xdate parse, and over here I'm just gonna say year, month, day, so that I keep the same format, even if that date is going to be created by default. So there we go. Okay, now that we are up to this point, let's fix something. We have to get rid of the data index over here. And now we're going to be creating the actual columns. We still need a few more things to be able to continue. So before we mix those two arrays, I'm going to be doing something really simple. If the start date is defined, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to turn it into an actual date object. The same deal with the end date. Just like I was saying, if it comes with this format, it's gonna work. Otherwise, I can do it some other way. This is what I decided to use. After I have mixed both objects, let me call a private method create columns. What this is going to do is basically just loop through the dates and create those extra columns. So that's going to be create columns. It's going to be method, and here I'm gonna do a few things. First, I'm gonna get the date information. So let me show you. I get the scope variable. I create a dummy array for now, a temp array, and then I'm gonna get the date data. I want the start date. So basically, if today is the 5th, the 11th, I'm gonna get that date. And then I'm also going to get how many days I'm going to show. So for that, I'm using getElapsed and I'm dividing by milliseconds, minutes, hours, and days to get the actual total, okay? I'm going to loop through those dates, something like this. I use a for loop, but I could have used anything else. So I'm looping through that data and I'm going to add to that array. So something simple like this, and I can type whatever I want. I can put any title that I want, but I already have something over here. That's the title I'm gonna be putting in. So basically it's just the current date by adding the day that I have over here. And I'm gonna give it a day and month format. Okay, I'm gonna say that it has a width of, I don't know, 40 pixels maybe. I think we're almost done with the first part. However, these columns, I have to specify they are part of the columns property. I believe 40 pixels is way too small. I'm gonna change it to 80 just so that you can see what's going on. And let's see it. And now I have all those columns over here. I have every single day up to the 30th of July. That's my fault. Actually, I should go one day over, okay? Or just say something like that. On something that is going to be useful, let's go to the CSS and add these classes over here. This is going to fix a few issues that we're going to have. Columns do not overflow. So this is going to help us be able to overflow those columns so that a chart can extend to even further to the right, okay? To make that work, of course, my CLS has to be that name over there, that class. Okay, and we also need to do something extra for that. I need to change the first column because right now each column is separate. And what I want to do is to have them call span. So this might sound a little bit confusing, but after I create the columns or right here, what I'm going to do is to apply a call span to the first column. Let's grab that first column, let's say 0 there, and I'm going to change the renderer. Okay, that's a function that allows me to change anything that I want for the actual cell. So it receives a value, some metadata, and the actual record. And here, what I'm going to do is change a few options from the metadata. TD CLS, gonna add the span columns class that I have on my CSS, and then I'm gonna change an attribute for the cell, and that's just going to be call span. How many columns? Well, as many as we have. Okay, so columns dot length. And then instead of the value, we're gonna render the actual line. So I'm gonna call another private method. I'm gonna call it render Gantt. So for now, let's create that render Gantt method. Okay, that's going to receive the value. And for now, it's just gonna return the same value. We're gonna change that in a few minutes. So let me just send the value over here. A few more things that we want to do. Well, we don't want the menu to show in these columns over here, so I'm just gonna add a few more options. Menu disabled, true. Sortable, we cannot sort by any of these columns, and they are not draggable. Let me save, okay, and let's see what's going on right now. And so this is what we have right now. So basically we have all our columns there with all the dates. It doesn't have a menu like any of the other columns, and I cannot move them around or sort by any of them. Okay, so what's next? Well, we have to draw the actual Gantt chart line. And that we will be doing over here. And apart from the value, I'm also going to be receiving the metadata. Okay, so let's put it here and the record. I might need everything, so I'm sending everything right now. Of course, I could have added everything inside this renderer over here, but I would rather have it on my own method. And this is where we're gonna draw that line. And for now, just to show it how this works, what I'm going to be doing is just rendering a short line. So let me just show it to you. This is not going to be realistic, and I'm going to add a div which is going to have some styling here. So I'm gonna say its style is position, relative. Just gonna give it a height of 20 pixels for now. And I'm gonna give it some title. Let's just say for now, hello. And inside that div, I'm gonna put there a separate div. I'm also going to locate this with position, but this time it's going to be absolute. I'm going to locate it somewhere. I'm just gonna say 2 pixels for now from the top. We're gonna change that. I'm gonna locate it somewhere from the left, let's say 20 pixels. I'm gonna give it a width, once again, something random for now, let's say 200 pixels. I'm gonna give it a color, let's say background color, and I'm just gonna say for now some shade of red, and I'm going to give it a height, say the same 20 pixels. So we are almost done with our Gantt chart. We are only missing a few bits and pieces, especially a couple of tricks to make it work. So let's start with the first one. Our Gantt view, it's a grid, but we haven't specified the actual CSS class that we need. And if I did, it would be an extra thing that the user would have to do. And we don't want them to actually specify the CSS class over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send that class to the parent grid. So something like this. And I would specify the class here. However, if I do, and the user specified something on the main view, I'm going to break it. So let's first check if the user has done so. There are several ways to do it in JavaScript. Right now, I'm just gonna check that it's not undefined and it's not null, okay? I could have also checked the type of the CLS variable, and if it is a string, I would concat the style that I want. So right now, I'm just gonna say something like this, and I'm going to concat the style that I set up for my column, okay? Otherwise, just send the column style, okay? So basically, I'm just establishing this class in the main view. And if you remember, that class basically is the main one, which will allow me to hide columns and make the first column the available width for my Gantt chart. And that takes me to the next step. We have set up a renderer for the main column, okay? And that one has a call span and things like that. What we are missing is we have to tell Ext.js that we want to hide all the other columns, okay? So basically I'm just doing it this way. I'm also going to receive value and meta there. I'm going to change the exact same way the TD class, and it's going to be hide column, okay? And then I have to return the value, and that's it. Those are the two tricks that I needed to do to make it work. Of course, the main column, it's going to have that renderer overwritten, and it's going to draw the Gantt chart. The other thing that we are missing is to actually calculate the width and the real position of that Gantt chart. But for now, this is what we have. Let's see what this is doing. And as you can see, we have three different charts there, okay? We have reached the complex part of this example. So let me first get my scope variable. Just to make it also easy, I'm just gonna pass the Gantt config into this variable over here. And now let's calculate a few more things. Actually, let me just put it like this. Let's get the actual total days that my example has. So I'm gonna put that inside this variable. This method over here is just checking the end date and the start date, and it's calculating the number of days that we have available. I'm going to get the start and end value that I have on this row here. So as you know, I have the record there. So let's get the first, let's say task start. And usually what I would do is just record get start. However, that's not going to be exactly that. I have a start field. I should get it from there. So Gantt config dot start field. But I don't know if that's an actual date. So basically what I'm going to do is just going to parse it and make sure that it's actually in the format of YMD. And then I'm going to do the same for the task end. Instead of start field, it would be end field. Okay, something that it's not required if the developer does it correctly is the following. I'm just gonna check both dates, and if task start is later than task end, I'm just gonna flip them. Okay, something simple. It's not required, but just in case. One more thing that I'm also going to check before I actually calculate everything is I'm going to check if the values are inside my Gantt chart span. So check if it is renderable. Okay. I also have it here just to make it a little bit quick. Gantt config start date is after the end date or end date is before task start. Then don't do anything and just return an empty string. So I'm just gonna check first if the config start date is greater than the task start. I'm just gonna send that start date to the task start, okay? Meaning if it's starting before this time span. And then I'm going to do the same for the end date, okay? If it's out of bounds, I'm just gonna put the same thing for the end date. I hope this is making sense. Now we have to actually calculate the elapsed time. And to get the left and the width of the chart, what I'm going to do is get the offset dates and the duration. So let's put it here and let's calculate those two. So right now what I'm doing here is calculating where the task start and check how much time has elapsed from the start date. Okay, that's going to help me get the left position. And now let's get the duration. And that's going to be pretty much the same. So over here, I'm getting the duration and I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to divide it by milliseconds, seconds, minutes, and hours. Okay, so that I get actual days. Now that I have that, let's calculate the actual width so that we can display it. Let's put here chart parameters. I'm going to first, well, actually, I'm going to put everything in an associative array or inside an object. And let's say left position is going to be calculated this way. What we have in offset days divided by total days. And since this is going to be a percentage, I'm multiplying it by 100. Then let's get the actual width, and the width is going to be the duration divided by total days. We are almost there. We're missing a few things, but let's use this chart config and let's get left position. So this is going to be something like that. And let's do the same for the width. Okay, we're going to add a few more things here. When I first prepared this example, I did it back in April. So let's change everything to July. Sorry if this is adding a few more minutes to our presentation. And of course, this is not pixels, this is percentage, like I said before. And let's check exactly what's going on. So we go and check that out. We got a fully functional Gantt chart, okay? There might be a few issues like this is not exact. This is my mistake. Let's see if we can solve it. We might not have the time, but it's something you can take home as homework because we are also missing a few more things. For example, I'm just going to make this look a little bit better. I'm gonna make the charts a little bit smaller. I'm gonna make them round. So let's say border radius 5 pixels. I might say top, let's say, I don't know, about 8 pixels. And let's see how that looks. And now it looks like this. Okay, that's a lot better looking, right? I think 8 pixels was too much. I think 5 pixels will be enough. But right now, all those charts are red, and that's because we actually told it to be red here. I don't want that color. I want to use a different color, which is going to be chart config.color, okay? And if you remember, we did set up something to check which color we were going to use. That was at the beginning. We had types here. And we also specified the type field. So if the type is def, it should be this color. If the type is QA, it should be this one, and same for break. So let's do that. Let's put here type color. So first I'm going to check if I have a type field set up, okay? If it's not null. Also, I should check if it's not undefined. But anyways, I'm going to get the actual type. And with the type, and double checking if I also have Gantt types, okay, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to get the type data. So let's put it here. Let type data equals, I'm checking that the type is not null. Once I got it, if that's the case, I'm going to get the type. Otherwise, I'm just gonna say, I don't know, no for now. I used a method there. Basically, I'm just searching the types array. Let's say type data. I'm looking for a type that actually matches that type name that I got from the type field, okay? If that's the case, I'm going to select that type, okay? Otherwise, I'm just going to grab a random colors. So let's just put a simple color here. I'm just gonna say that the basic color is actually shade of red, okay? And here, if we have the actual color, if this is not null, then we are going to put the actual color there. So color equals type data dot color. Okay, let's actually check for both so that they did actually define the color in case they didn't forget to put color there. Okay, then that color is going to be set up here. I hope that makes sense. And to finish this off before we actually test, let's create the tooltip. That's the only parameter we're missing from the ones we sent. Let's recreate that. So inside the Gantt chart, I'm gonna modify the tooltip. What I'm going to do is basically say new Ext template, and I'm gonna pass the tooltip that I have. Remember that if the user did not specify it, it's going to have a default value. And now we're gonna go into our render method, and over here we're going to add that tooltip. And what we are just going to do is apply the data. So that's going to be Gantt config dot tooltip apply, and what we are sending there is the data, like I said, and the data should be under record, so record.data. Okay, and instead of title, what we're gonna have is the chart config dot tooltip. Okay, and this is gonna grab this tooltip and change the values. Notice that we don't have days there. This is not an actual value. We have to calculate that one. Well, we actually have calculated it, but it's not inside the data. So that one is not going to work. But here it's showing design, dev, development one dev. Over here, those are two different colors. Okay, so let's go and fix that. And let's add those days. Basically here what I do is I create a new variable, okay, where I'm just going to apply record.data with the new extra data. So here I'm just gonna have days, and what I'm going to send there are the actual calculated days for this example. So that's duration. Okay, if I need something else, for example, like maybe I can just set something up like I don't know, start, and then I have also a variable for that, which is offset days. And whatever I may need, I can put it there. And instead of using a record data, what I would be using is actually just data there. Okay, it is a bunch of stuff now that we have done. Let's go and check this out. And now, as you can see, it's telling you exactly how long it lasts. Okay, we have this little offset at the beginning. Let's get rid of that, and then we will be finished with this example. And for that, I'm just going to do something simple. Let's put it here. I'm just gonna say that the padding is 7 pixels, 0 pixels, 6 pixels, and 0 pixels. That's top, right, bottom, left. And this should be part of the span columns. Let's save. Let's test this out. And now the chart starts at the beginning. There's a little bit of an issue still, but that's just because of the rounded numbers that I'm using, okay? So basically that's a start for a Gantt chart. Let's now move on to the last example of the day. It's a little bit late, so that last one, I'm gonna go as fast as I can. And finally, our last component, our fifth example, the Kanban board. Just like the previous example, there is plenty more that we can do. This is just to get you started. Without further ado, let's just move on and let's see how this works. Okay, since this is the last example and we are running out of time, let me be as quick as I can. First, we have the Kanban view. This is the main view, as with all the other examples. It is a panel. It has a center layout. It's loading my new board from the UX folder. It has some data, and it's creating the Kanban board right in the middle. The Kanban board is inside UX Kanban. Doesn't have much. It's just basically a panel right now that requires also a Kanban column. And the Kanban column is just a view right now. Why am I using a view? Well, that's the one that has properties set up to click and drag without much of an issue. About the store, well, I have the Kanban data here. Something simple. I'm not going to be able to use everything that you see here. And I also have a model. In this case, the Kanban model is something simple. Anyways, I'm going to leave everything that I need open here. I also have the board CSS file here. It's just basically creating some styling for the Kanban task and the Kanban column. Now, let's go on and let's start creating our board. Okay, so like I said, this is all I have right now for the Kanban board. It's basically a window right in the center. We take a look at it, it looks like this. So I'm just gonna pass the parameters even if nothing happens. Gonna say that I have an ID field. I also have a filter and I have a text field, which come from my data store. So task ID, title, and status. So this should be task ID. And I gotta make sure that it matches the case. Also, I'm going to set up the actual columns. So that's going to be an array, and I'm going to have a column for each of the different status, which I'm calling filters. So let's say I have the backlog, I have in progress, and finally I have completed. So let's say here that's in progress. And like I said, completed, completed. The board has to receive those parameters and continue setting everything up. Just gonna send the store name like this. And the board needs its config property, And here I'm going to set up, like I mentioned before, everything that I need. Let's put the defaults here. I have the store name, the columns, and the fields. And as you can see, well, pretty much I am overriding everything on the parameters I'm passing from over this other side, okay? Okay, let's create an empty items array. This will simplify a few things later. And let's create the init component method. As you know, here we need the scope variable me. We need to call the parent method. We need to create the columns. So basically, I'm just going to loop through those columns and create them. For that, I'm going to create a method called create column that it's going to receive the column name or title and also the filter. So I'm just going to say here title and let's say filter. And down here, I'm going to loop through all the columns. I'm just using a basic for loop. You can use whatever you find more useful. Okay, and then I'm gonna get the actual element, me.columns, and then I'm going to push that creation into the items array. So basically here I'm just gonna call me.createColumn, and what I'm going to send is the element dot title and the element dot filter. Once again, I'm gonna get the scope and I'm just gonna return a basic object that contains what I need. And for that, all that I need is something like this. Okay, actually, I don't need those two. I'm gonna send the X type, which is Kanban column, comes from there, the title, which I'm receiving, the store name, which I have over here, the fields, which I also have here, and the filter that I'm receiving. And that's going to create the column. Then the column right now doesn't have anything. Like I said, it's an X view, but it doesn't contain anything inside of it. I'm gonna give it a title, a default title. Gonna give it a flex value of 1 so that all the columns have the same width. I'm gonna give it an item selector, which is used to click and drag, and it's also the style that it's on the CSS. I'm going to add here the config parameters. Which ones am I receiving? Well, I'm receiving these three: store name, fields, and filter. So I'm gonna put them there, and I'm gonna give them a default value. So let's say null, null, and I'm just gonna leave it like that. And let's continue. And next, let's initialize this component. Okay, same deal, me equal this, me dot call parent. Okay, now I'm going to get the store, get the values that are filtered for this column. So as you remember, I'm getting a filter. Okay, let's change that to null. And with that filter, I'm gonna get only the values that belong to this column. Here, I'm just creating the store. If it doesn't exist, I'm just creating a basic store so that it doesn't throw an error. And then I'm setting up the filters so that it brings only the tasks that match the current column. Okay, then what I'm going to be using is a template. I'm going to check if the fields do indeed exist, and if they do, I'm going to specify a TPL or template. So I'm just going to say me.tpl, and this works for several classes, but in specific in this case for XView. And here I'm just going to specify something simple. Let me get it from my notes. Okay, and we have a title, okay, which is the title that the column received, and then we're looping through every single item. Okay, so for every field, we're going to be creating the actual card for this task. And let's go test it. There are a few things apart from clicking and dragging that we are missing. Here we have each of our columns, although right now they are rows. So let's fix this and put them side by side. You should know by now how to do that. If you don't remember, well, basically we are missing here the layout. Let's say layout hbox, and let's try it once again. And now we have it like this. You may say, wait, this doesn't match the whole height. Okay, then once again, you should know this by now. We should have instead a layout like this. We should specify the type, and then we should also specify the alignment, which in this case should be stretch. We do it that way. Now our Kanban board has the whole height. Now the following part is actually clicking and dragging. So let's add that functionality. This is what's new. I'm going to add this in a listener. I'm gonna put this inside the render listener. Why? Because this will make it easier to work with, since I know that all the cards have been created and they are about to get rendered. So I'm gonna add the click and drag to all of them. So the renderer receives the column. I'm gonna get the actual element there with get L. And now I'm going to be adding a few methods here. Let's start with the drag zone, okay? This one will get the element and then do something. And then also I'm going to be creating the drop zone, okay? And same idea, it's going to receive the element and some other options there, okay? And let's now make those methods functional. So I'm going to first add a method that it's going to repair the data. This is something that we need. Basically, it gets the correct coordinates when we click on an element to drag it. Then we're also going to check this method, get drag data. It receives the event parameter. And from there, we are going to get the selected item. And from there, we are going to get the selected item, okay? With this source element, if everything is correct and we do in fact get this element, then we are going to first clone that element so that it can be moved, okay? That's the duplicate. We're gonna give it a new ID. We do that by using Ext ID. And then we're going to return that duplicate and several other parameters, like so. So here's the duplicate, here's the source element, here's the column store. We need this xFly with the source element to get the coordinates, and then we're gonna get the record from the source element, okay? And that's what we need to start dragging. What about the drop zone? Okay, first we are gonna notify we can drop or not drop the object. So it also has the source parameter here. We're gonna get the prototype and we're gonna check if the column is in a drag zone. And depending on what happens, we're gonna show if it's allowed or not allowed. Then we're also going to have a method to actually perform the drop, okay? If we are in the original drag zone, we're gonna return false. Otherwise, we're gonna get the drag record. We're gonna set the new filter and we are going to reload the store. And we're gonna assume that everything worked correctly. And let's go and check this out. So now I have my different cards on each column. As you can see, I cannot drop them outside or in the same column, but I can move them around into different columns. Of course, here I should be communicating with the backend to save the new position. This is a basic idea. Okay, what else could I have added? Well, I don't have the time to do it since we have gone over time right now, but I can show you when I prepare this example. We could also have a plus button. We could add a lot more options there, like duplicate or delete or things like that. That should alter just the store and that should work fine. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed today's webinar. Next month during JavaScript days, I'm going to be doing something like this. It's really interesting. It's using a natural language to actually filter and sort columns. I hope I see you next month. We have reached the end of our webinar. Just as I promised, here are some useful links. If you want to learn more about Sencha, just visit our website. If you want to see some examples at work, just go to our kitchen sink. Here you will be able to see a bunch of different examples at work. So basically you will be able to see the grids, the charts, and everything that we have here for you. So there are a bunch of examples. You can see the code, how it works, and integrate those examples into your application. Okay. Yeah, you can also visit our Sencha docs for all our documentation. And you can also use our newest Sencha AI. You can ask it anything about Sencha and it will try to help you out and also guide you through our docs. And finally, if you are a React developer and you want to take any of the 140 XJS components or any of the custom components you have built into React, you can do it by using React. We have plenty of webinars on our YouTube channel. Go check them out and we can talk about that in a different session. And before we end, let's just move on to a quick Q&A. Thank you again. I see a few questions in the question panel over here. I think most of them have been answered directly, but let me just go through a few of them. Larissa asked if, sorry for the noise. Larissa asked if we're gonna have the video in YouTube. Yes, we're gonna have it later on. We will also post the examples probably on a Git repository, maybe on a blog post too. So please keep on checking and we'll make them available. Also, we got a bunch of ideas from another attendee. I don't have his name. He only shows up as colleague. So thank you for all your comments. Some of the things you were asking, we did show it on a second component. So thank you again. And we have run out of time. I went 30 minutes over the allocated time for this webinar. There were a lot of examples and I wanted to show you all of them. I hope this has been helpful. I tried to cover different levels, programming levels. So there's a lot more that can be done, but 5 examples, 5 custom components in 1 hour and a half, it's a lot. So thank you again. And I will see you next month on the JavaScript Days event that we're having. Thank you. Have a great day.